Good afternoon. I'm Meg Oliver. We continue with our breaking news coverage out of Los Angeles, where a jury found tech giants Meta and Google liable for failing to warn its users about the dangers of their social media platforms. The jury voted to award $3 million in damages, with Meta responsible for 70% of that and YouTube on the hook for the remaining 30%. The 6-week trial has featured high-profile witnesses, including Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta Platforms, Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram, and Christos Goodrow, the vice president of engineering at YouTube. Jurors also heard from the lead plaintiff, a 20-year-old woman identified as KGM, along with her therapist, whistleblowers, and experts on social media addiction. She says she became hooked on YouTube at 6 and Instagram at 9, and that was by age 10 she was struggling with depression, isolation, and self-harm. The landmark decision comes after Meta was found liable in a separate case over child sexual exploitation on its platforms in New Mexico. The jury ruled Tuesday the company violated state law by failing to warn users about the dangers of its platforms and protect children from sexual predators. Meta was ordered to pay $375 million in damages. The company plans to appeal the decision. We want to bring in CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Ling, who joins us from our Los Angeles bureau. Thanks so much for being with us. I just want to start with, what was the reaction when the verdict was announced?
This is a major moment. I've started to hear from families from all across the country who I've interviewed over the last 15 years covering the impact of social media on children, young people, and families. And what we're starting to hear is a sense of hope mixed with relief, and a sense of, okay, what's next? The idea here is really centered on what the jury has found in Los Angeles. They found that Meta and YouTube are both liable on all charges. And yes, $3 million was decided as the amount that should be awarded in damages to the plaintiff, KGM, who's now 20 years old, as you put earlier, who says she became addicted to these products early on in her life. We have to remember that Meta is a multi-billion-dollar company. This is just a drop in the bucket. But what is the larger point here? This, along with the New Mexico case, could set precedent for the thousands of other cases underway across the country. Multiple other state attorneys general have brought similar cases against Meta, YouTube, Snap, the parent company of Snapchat. This decision and what ultimately comes of it, plus New Mexico, are likely to have a major influence on how those cases proceed in the legal system. Now, what we know is that there was 8 days of deliberation here in Los Angeles before the jury was able to come to a decision. In New Mexico, it was a 7-week trial about child sexual exploitation on Meta's platforms, and that jury was able to come to a decision in just 1 day, less than 1 day. And so this is an inflection point after years and years of so many parents, young people themselves asking for the federal government, for example, Congress, to provide regulation of these tech giants. That has been a giant failure. At the state level, there has been some minor regulations passed by state legislatures, and yet still these problems persist when it comes to mental health. Meta says in response to the Los Angeles Superior Court case, this decision here, that they are evaluating their legal options right now, and they expect to have more to say as the punitive damages are assessed. But this is a powerful moment for any family who has children on social media, all of the victims who have been impacted by similar issues that KGM brought up in her case before LA Superior Court, Meg.
Ling, a powerful moment indeed. As you mentioned, it's not looking good for Meta. And as a parent with 3 teenagers at home, I know that everybody out there is asking the same question. How quickly do you think it is possible that this could force these companies to change how they operate?
So the case in New Mexico, for example, in May, we expect a bench trial from that court as to determine what should happen or what will be demanded of Meta in terms of changes to their platform. But let's remember, Meta plans to appeal that case. Meta is also evaluating the legal options here in Los Angeles. And so many of the legal experts we've been talking to have said this is probably eventually headed in some consolidated form to the Supreme Court. You also have a major federal case in Oakland coming, a multi-district litigation, and that trial, I believe, is expected to start in June. And so when you put all of this together, plus all of the other court cases, changing these platforms will require a major heavy lift, and it will have to be specific in nature. And so it may very well end up at the highest court when it comes to any change that you or I or your teenagers or our kids in our communities would actually feel on their smartphones in these apps.
You can definitely feel the momentum building, as you mentioned. What have the reactions been like from the parties involved?
So Meta has said it's evaluating its legal options in LA. And in terms of the New Mexico case, they plan to appeal. We have heard from some of these advocates. Their emails and texts are rolling in right now. They say that this is an encouraging moment, that these companies are being held accountable for designing products that addict and harm children. Others saying that it's revealing that these conclusions were drawn by these two juries. And in the case of the multi-district litigation that's coming later this year, the lawyers there say they look forward to presenting their own evidence of misconduct that they allege that was conducted by Google and Meta, as well as TikTok and Snap. So the story certainly just beginning, even though this is a major watershed moment. But if you look back at what happened here in Los Angeles, you had CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who you just saw on the screen there, in court, presenting his case with his legal team directly to the jury, at times, a very tense, a very challenging situation in court, but saying that, they did not design these products to be harmful to young people. They did not design these to be addictive. While, the plaintiff side bringing in evidence saying that there were internal memos that showed that this company wanted to increase the number of hours that young people were spending on Instagram, on Facebook. And so that's what the jury had to parse through over these 8 days, asking multiple questions of the judge. And here we are today with a verdict. And while $3 million, for most people sounds like a lot of money, it's a minor, teeny tiny drop in the bucket for a company like Meta. What is more important here is what the final outcome is after this. I would imagine we may see an appeal or some kind of additional legal action, what that ultimately leads to when it comes to the products. But this is it's an approach, it's an interesting legal approach, right? This is taking addiction and consumer product safety laws, in the case of New Mexico, and using those as the vehicle to attempt to rein in these tech companies and hold them accountable. Very different than what has been approached in Congress, what has been proposed at the federal level. So we'll see how this changes the landscape, but we're waiting to hear from the jury, and we will be in court shortly for you, Meg.
And Ling, one last question, because as you mentioned, this fine is a drop in the bucket, especially for Meta. What really would make an impact is losing viewers and potential advertisers. What does that road look like at this point after having this decision come down?
That's a really great question. I don't know the answer to it. We do know that advertising dollars flow very strongly into these social media platforms because that is where people are and that's where they're spending their time. So it will be interesting to see if we see any material impact on their revenue when it comes to their quarterly reports. In the case of Google, which owns YouTube, and Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, it will, if these court cases lead to platform changes in the features, so to speak, that may change the game. But I think it's hard to say right now. It's really unclear. It's very early. But what we do know is that there's this sense of responsibility now shifting lanes, so to speak. For so long, it's been about, parents having to deal with parental controls, which so many parents have told us they're doing to the best of their ability. But these products have been designed in a way, in their view, to be addicting and impossible to manage when it comes to their teenagers' mental health. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot from both sides later today outside of LA Superior Court, and we'll bring that to you.
All right, Ling, Ken, thank you so much for covering all of this. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
We want to bring in now CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi. Caroline, it's great to see you. A huge decision here to unpack. This now makes 2 verdicts against social media platforms. Could this force changes in how they design those addictive algorithms?
I think we can only hope. This is certainly a clarion call to these big tech behemoths, basically saying, well, if the legislature is not going to step in and regulate you, the legal system is going to. The legal system tends to lag about a decade behind what's going on in the culture to sort of catch up with regulating spheres. And I think, we've all known for over a decade that these types of platforms are addictive and can be harmful to our children's mental health. And now we're seeing it play out. It just took a while for those legal theories to develop. It's true. These are novel legal theories, which is why I think there are some appealable issues here. But basically, what has been argued on the parts of these plaintiffs, and certainly in New Mexico, is that it's a products liability case. It's like big tobacco, essentially, like those cases a decade ago, that these products were designed to have a defect in them, which is that they were designed to be a literal drug. And so what you saw plaintiffs arguing in this case in California is that these features like the endless scrolling, the ability to like and have followers and things like that, even these filters that can be used on Instagram, that those all were defects of this product, and that that Meta and YouTube and those platforms, that they knew how harmful and addictive that these features were, and yet in the face of that they continued to use them and really put profits over safety. Now in New Mexico, that case was a little bit different. It was about child sexual predators that had used the platforms. The allegation were that these platforms knew that these predators were on their platforms and they did nothing really to stop it. That legal theory has to do with really what has traditionally been a federal shield for liability for content that is posted on these platforms. Traditionally, it has shielded these big companies from liability, but we're seeing that theory, get holes poked in it. So we'll see if it stands up to these appeals, but certainly this is a new dawn, a new era.
Well, speaking of the appeals, Meta already said they will appeal the New Mexico decision. Could this Los Angeles decision also be appealed?
I think certainly they will appeal the Los Angeles decision. One thing I would note, the $3 million, that's a compensatory damages amount. They haven't deliberated on the punitive damages portion. Punitive damages are just what they sound like. They're meant to be punishment for a company's deceitful or fraudulent behavior. These compensatory damages, I'm not surprised, are so low, in the big scheme of things, because they're for one plaintiff, and they're supposed to sort of make that plaintiff whole based on her pain and suffering and the emotional distress that was inflicted upon her. And remember, this case centered around that one plaintiff that went by her initials in this case, about her mental health struggles, claiming she had been addicted to both YouTube and Instagram from age 6 on, really. And so, monetary damages can hurt companies' bottom lines. In the case of the New Mexico case, a judge has yet to decide what sort of restrictions will be imposed. But I think we're seeing a sea change here, and certainly a push for potentially the legislature to step in and do some of that heavy lifting that the legal realm maybe can't do.
We've all talked about how addictive these devices are. I remember interviewing Jonathan Haidt, the author of The Anxious Generation, and he was talking about, you can't expect a kid to put a cell phone in their pocket and not expect them to reach for it several times. He compared it to a heroin user. You wouldn't have them put a needle in their pocket and not expect them to shoot up. That's how addictive we're talking about. I'm curious, from a legal perspective, what does this trial reveal about this ongoing debate over social media, the mental health, and teenagers?
Absolutely. I mean, I myself, as a adult with a brain with a fully developed prefrontal cortex, cannot resist the endless scrolling, and certainly I see it in my children. Any parent with young children or teenage kids understands exactly what this trial is about. It's an uphill battle, and parents can't be the only one left fighting because it's just you can't win. I think the legal issue here is exactly this issue of, well, what really is addiction? Because the plaintiff's theory here again was a products liability theory that the product was actually literally addictive, just like a drug. And the defense pushed back on that, saying, well, was she ever diagnosed with a social media addiction? We haven't really seen that in the mental health sphere, like in terms of being defined in the DSM. But I think we're moving towards that direction in terms of what can be qualified and quantified in terms of mental health disorders that are caused and or exacerbated by social media use. And we're going to see that being used a lot more often in the legal space.
Caroline, we know kids average more than 7 hours on screens a day. We know there's a mental health crisis. We know they are struggling with addiction, and there's this loneliness epidemic. What is it going to take for lawmakers to step in with regulation after this outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. I feel the same way. Look, we've seen other countries take steps, particularly in Australia, limiting social media use to an age limit. Jonathan Haidt, as you noticed, as you noted, implementing this wait till 8 sort of initiative. Certainly in my town and in towns across the country, parents are banding together because the legislature will not step in and because it takes a long time for the legal system to play out. But you can't stand up to companies of this size. I mean, they're just, again, behemoths. And I think we're seeing through this discovery process, we're seeing sort of behind the scenes what is known by these executives about their product, about the nature of their product, and really that they are pushing more time on the screens knowingly based on these addictive features. And I think people are angry about it, and rightfully so.
Absolutely. Jolene Kent and Caroline Polisi, thank you both so much.